My parents skipped my wedding for my sister's beach trip. Months later, they begged me to attend my sister's. And I said, not this time. When people ask why I don't speak to my parents anymore, they usually assume something huge must have happened. They imagine screaming matches, family lawsuits, years of constant abuse. The truth is much quieter than that. Sometimes a relationship doesn't end because of one terrible moment. Sometimes it dies from 1,000 small choices that all send the same message. You come second, in my family. That message had my younger sister's name written all over it. Her name was Lily. She wasn't cruel. She was simply used to everything revolving around her. If she wanted a different restaurant, dinner plans changed. If she wanted to celebrate her birthday for an entire week, everyone happily agreed. If she forgot to buy someone a Christmas gift, my parents insisted it was the thought that counted. Meanwhile, I learned very early that my own disappointments were supposed to be handled quietly. I became the easy child, the independent one, the one who never caused problems. Looking back, I think that was my biggest mistake. Because every time I stayed silent, my parents assumed I wasn't hurting. I met my fiancée, Rachel, during my final year of graduate school. She had this incredible ability to notice the little things. She remembered my favorite coffee order after hearing it once. She celebrated every tiny achievement as if it were life-changing. For the first time, I felt like someone actually saw me. 3 years later, I proposed. She said yes before I even finished asking. We planned a small autumn wedding. Nothing extravagant, just close friends, family, and the people who genuinely mattered to us. The invitations went out nearly 10 months in advance. Everyone confirmed, including my parents. My mother even cried when she received hers. She promised she wouldn't miss it for the world. About 3 weeks before the ceremony, Lily called the family group chat with exciting news. Her boyfriend had surprised her with a luxury beach vacation. The problem? The trip happened to fall on the exact weekend as my wedding. At first, everyone laughed about the coincidence. Surely she'd reschedule. She couldn't possibly choose a vacation over her brother's wedding. Instead, she announced she had already paid thousands of dollars. The reservations weren't refundable. She wasn't changing her plans. I figured that was unfortunate, but it had nothing to do with my parents. They would still come, right? A few days later, my mother asked if we could meet for lunch. She looked nervous before I even sat down. My father kept stirring his coffee without saying a word. Then my mother gently explained that Lily was devastated. She didn't want to miss my wedding. But she also couldn't afford to lose the money she'd spent on the trip. So, they had decided to go with her. At first, I honestly thought she was joking. I laughed. Neither of them did. My father quietly said that Lily would be all alone on vacation otherwise. My mother reminded me that weddings were stressful enough without worrying about guests. She insisted I'd be surrounded by friends anyway. Then she said the sentence I'll never forget. "We'll celebrate with you when we get back." Celebrate what? The wedding that would already be over? The father-daughter dance my wife would never have with my dad because he'd chosen a beach resort instead? The family photos that would always have 2 empty spaces? I looked at both of them, waiting for someone to admit this was ridiculous. No one did. For the first time in 30 years, I realized exactly where I ranked in my own family. And something inside me quietly broke. I didn't beg them to change their minds. I didn't remind them how long Rachel and I had spent planning the wedding. I didn't ask them to choose me, because deep down, I already knew they had. They had simply chosen someone else. I stood up from the table, hugged my mother goodbye, shook my father's hand, and left. Neither of them followed me. That evening, Rachel found me sitting alone in our apartment, staring at the seating chart we'd spent weeks perfecting. 2 empty seats sat directly in front of the aisle. My parents' seats. I quietly picked up a pen and crossed out both names. Rachel watched me for a moment before asking if I was okay. I smiled. Not because I was. Because I was tired of letting other people's decisions ruin moments that belonged to us. The wedding arrived 3 weeks later. The weather couldn't have been more perfect. Golden leaves covered the ground. Soft music drifted through the garden. Friends flew in from different states. Former professors came. Even coworkers I'd only known for a year made the trip. Everyone kept asking when my parents would arrive. I simply smiled and said they couldn't make it. No elaborate explanation, no excuses, just the truth. When it came time for family photos, Rachel quietly squeezed my hand. Without saying a word, her parents stepped beside me. Her father rested a hand on my shoulder. Her mother adjusted my tie like she'd been doing it my whole life. In that moment, I realized something unexpected. Family isn't always the people who raise you. Sometimes it's the people who show up. The ceremony was beautiful. Rachel walked down the aisle with tears in her eyes. I barely held myself together. As we exchanged vows, every person sitting in those chairs had made one simple choice. They chose to be there. That mattered more than any expensive gift. Later that evening, while everyone danced, my cousin walked over holding his phone. He hesitated before showing me the screen. My sister had posted dozens of beach photos online. She was smiling in every picture. Cocktails, sunsets, jet skis, family dinners, and right in the middle of the album, a photo of my parents raising tropical drinks with the caption, "Making unforgettable memories together." It had been posted less than an hour after Rachel and I said "I do." I stared at the screen for several seconds. Then I handed the phone back. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt finished. The next morning, before leaving for our honeymoon, I blocked my parents' numbers. Not out of spite. Out of peace. For the first time in my life, I stopped waiting for them to become the parents I wished I'd had. Months passed. Life became wonderfully ordinary. Rachel and I settled into our new home. I received a promotion at work. We adopted a rescue dog. Without the constant disappointment, I realized how calm life could actually be. Then, nearly 8 months later, my phone rang from an unknown number. It was my aunt. She sounded unusually cheerful. "Lily's getting married!" I congratulated her. Then she said everyone hoped this wedding could finally bring the family back together. Apparently, my parents had spent weeks trying to contact me, blocked. Emails went unanswered. Letters were returned unopened. They wanted me there, not just as a guest, as Lily's best man. I honestly thought she was joking. My sister and I had never even been particularly close. Then my aunt explained. Lily's fiancé was an only child. His side of the church would be packed. My absence would raise uncomfortable questions. They wanted the family to look united. That single sentence told me everything. They didn't miss me. They missed the appearance of having me. A few days later, my mother finally reached me through my work email. She wrote nearly 3 pages. She admitted missing my wedding had been a mistake. She said the family needed healing. She begged me not to punish Lily for the past. Then she ended the message with one final request. "Please come. It would mean everything to your sister." I read the email twice. Then I closed my laptop. Rachel looked up from the couch and quietly asked what I was going to do. I smiled. Not out of revenge. Not out of anger. Simply because, for the first time, the decision was entirely mine. And after everything that had happened, I already knew my answer. It wasn't complicated. It was just one sentence. "Not this time." I didn't ignore the email. I replied the next morning. The entire message was only 4 sentences long. I congratulated Lily on her engagement. I wished both of them a beautiful wedding and a happy marriage. Then I politely declined the invitation. I ended with the same words my parents had once said to me. "I'm sure you'll still have a wonderful day surrounded by the people who are there." I hit send. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone started ringing. First my mother, then my father, then Lily. Then relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. I answered none of them. By that evening, my voicemail was full. Some messages begged me to reconsider. Others accused me of holding a grudge. One uncle even told me it had only been one wedding. Only one wedding. I replayed that sentence several times. Exactly. People only get one. That weekend, my parents drove to our house without warning. Rachel looked through the window and quietly asked if I wanted her to tell them we weren't home. I shook my head. Running away wasn't necessary anymore. I opened the front door. My mother immediately started crying. She said Lily was heartbroken. She couldn't imagine walking down the aisle knowing her brother wasn't there. My father admitted they had made the wrong choice the previous year. He said they had underestimated how deeply it would hurt me. Then he asked if I couldn't just forgive everyone and move on. I listened without interrupting. When they finished, I asked them one question. "Did either of you ask Lily to cancel her beach trip?" Neither of them answered. I asked another. "Did either of you tell her she should choose her brother's wedding over a vacation?" Again, silence. Finally, my father quietly admitted they never even suggested it. They had simply assumed I would understand. Just like always, I nodded. Then I said something I had spent years practicing in therapy. "Do you know what hurts the most? It isn't that you missed my wedding. It's that neither of you expected anyone else to sacrifice anything. You only expected me." Neither of them argued, because they couldn't. For years, every compromise had come from the same person. Me. I wasn't refusing to attend Lily's wedding because I wanted revenge. I was refusing because pretending everything was fine would erase the consequences of their choices. Actions only matter if they actually cost something. This time, the cost belonged to them. Before leaving, my mother handed me a folded envelope. Inside were 2 photographs. The first was from my wedding. Rachel and I stood smiling between her parents. The empty seats in the front row were impossible to miss. The second photo had been taken during Lily's beach vacation. My parents and sister were laughing on the sand, holding tropical drinks beneath a bright sunset. Someone had circled the date printed in the corner. It was the exact day of my wedding. My mother whispered that she had looked at those 2 pictures almost every day for the past year. She said she finally understood what she'd traded away. For the first time, I believed her. The regret was real. But regret doesn't create a time machine. A few weeks later, Lily got married. Rachel and I spent that weekend hiking through a national park several hours away. No phones, no family drama. Just fresh air and silence. On Sunday evening, I turned my phone back on. There was only one new message. It was from Lily. No accusations, no guilt, just one sentence. I finally know what it feels like when the people you count on don't show up. Apparently, several of our relatives had skipped her wedding after hearing why I wasn't there. Not because I asked them to. Because they made their own decisions. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I replied, "I'm sorry you had to experience that. And I hope none of us ever repeat it." That was the beginning of the first honest conversation my sister and I had ever had. For years, she'd benefited from being the favorite. She'd never stopped to question it. Now she finally had. Sometimes people don't understand your pain until life quietly hands it back to them. Not as punishment. As perspective. That was 3 years ago. Life looks very different now. Rachel and I recently celebrated our 3rd wedding anniversary. We bought our first house. We planted a tree in the backyard on the day we moved in. A small tradition we hope to continue every time our family reaches a new milestone. My relationship with my parents still isn't what it once was. In some ways, it never will be. There are birthdays they missed. Memories that can never be recreated. Wedding photos that will always have 2 empty seats in the front row. Some moments only happen once. No apology can bring them back. But something did change. For the first time in my life, my parents stopped asking me to be the bigger person. Instead, they started taking responsibility for being the smaller ones. They apologized without adding excuses. They stopped expecting instant forgiveness. They accepted that rebuilding trust would happen on my timeline, not theirs. That mattered more than any speech they could have given. As for Lily, we slowly became something we'd never really been before. Brother and sister. Not because we suddenly became best friends. Because we finally started treating each other like equals. A few months after her wedding, she admitted something that surprised me. She said she had spent years believing our parents' favoritism was normal. She assumed I didn't mind because I never complained. Only after I walked away did she realize silence isn't the same as happiness. Sometimes silence is what people choose when they've given up hoping anyone will listen. She apologized for accepting a place on the pedestal without ever asking who had been pushed off to make room for her. I accepted her apology. Not because she was blameless, but because she was willing to learn from it. People often ask if refusing to attend her wedding was worth it. The answer isn't about revenge. It never was. I didn't skip her wedding to hurt anyone. I skipped it because I finally understood something I wish I'd learned much earlier. Boundaries only work when they're real. If I had shown up smiling, taken the family photos, and pretended everything was fine, I would have been teaching everyone the same lesson they had believed my entire life. That my feelings could always wait. This time, they couldn't. Looking back, I don't remember the expensive decorations at my wedding. I don't remember the menu. I barely remember the music. What I remember is who showed up. The people who rearranged flights. The friends who drove across the country. My wife's parents, who stood beside me when my own parents chose not to. Those are the people who taught me what family actually looks like. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by presence, by choosing to be there when it matters most. My parents skipped my wedding for my sister's beach trip. Months later, they begged me to attend hers. When I said, "Not this time," they thought I was punishing them. The truth was much simpler. For the first time in my life, I was treating my own heart with the same importance they had always expected me to give everyone else's. And that single decision changed every relationship I had afterward. Because once people realize you won't accept being an afterthought anymore, they have to make a choice. Either they'll finally start treating you like a priority, or they'll walk away. Either way, you finally find peace. Thanks for reading.